From the lands of Tirasleen to the kingdom of Galadorn and the village of the Nelwynds and the immemorial city, this is Casterly Talk, the Willow discussions, kicking off our coverage of not Willow the film, because we already covered that, but Willow the series. Should they have titled it something else? Willow 2, Willow subtitle? We'll leave that up to you. But it's also called Willow, and we are here today. I am taking the lead on this quest, but don't worry, I didn't leave that grumpy knight at home. Oh no, I brought him with me because I needed someone to take an arrow just in case. I needed somebody to have my back, and that, of course, is, as always, our fearless leader, Ken Knapsack, is here.
Hey, a grumpy night. I don't like to sleep on the ground. I don't camp, so I'll stay in the castle. You all go have an adventure.
Yeah, you could be the one that's like, no, we need you. You're the commander. And then later on, you're secretly evil, which is something that we will get into. Now, this is a departure from some of the stuff we normally do here. We're adding Willow to the rotation. We already covered the 1988 original film, myself and Nikki Kumar. We had a great time talking about that film. I was revisiting it for the first time in years. Nikki was watching it for the first time. And then all of a sudden, boom, here we are. We're beginning this mini series. It's headed up by Jonathan Kasdan, someone you might have heard of. He, along with his father, some guy named Lawrence Kasdan, co-wrote solo a Star Wars story. So he's no stranger to the Lucasfilm family, but he grew up on this film, Willow, as did many people. Ken, you're one of those people included. And here we are, a project that a lot of people thought maybe would never happen, seemed like a nice dream, but who cares about Willow, right? Well, someone did, and they put a lot of money into it, and here it is.
I love these stories of John Kasdan on the set of Solo telling Warwick, I'm going to get Lucasfilm to do this. I'm going to get them to do it. And here we are. We did it. Dreams rarely come true in Hollywood, but it's come true for this team.
That's true. Yeah. Ron Howard, of course, directing Solo probably helped a lot. Imagine Entertainment is involved with this. You've got Ron Howard producing. You've got some, familiar faces, but also returning creative forces. Episode 2, which we'll also be talking about because it was a double premiere. Episodes 1 and 2 was actually written by Bob Dolman, who wrote the screenplay off of George's ideas for the original film. So they got 73-year-old Bob Dolman to come in and play again, which was really exciting to see his name in the credits. These 2 episodes are called The Gales and The High Alduin. We'll be talking about them together. It's hard not to when they do these double premieres. We had a little bit of that as well with Rings of Power when we were covering that. But Ken, tell me about your temperature going into this, having known Willow for a long time, having been influenced in it, at least in some way, even if that way is just sorcerer. But we've had a lot of build up to this, but it's also, we're not going to lie and act like it's some legendary property. It's always sort of been the other one.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And thank you to you and Nikki for doing kind of a dive into the movie last week. And we talked about that the previous week. I was 12 in 1988 when this movie came out. So in one way, I was perfectly primed for it. And I saw it in theaters. And I enjoyed it. Jokes aside, hey, look, we all start to form our identities early, including our sexual identities. And Saoirse, Joanne Whaley, a bold, redheaded woman with a sword, something that stayed with me. If you know my personal life, I have a very fiery redhead fiance who is broadsword trained. So, you know who you are early, which is a different, interesting social conversation to have. So I joke, but that was part of my appeal for this movie. Like, ooh, like this Val Kilmer guy's doing crazy things, and now he's flying jet planes. He's also Mad Mardigan. But I had a different relationship as 12. I was starting to play baseball. And by the way, you could be a sports fan and you could be a fantasy fan. I really believe it's the same muscle. But back then, particularly, it was like, you're growing up. It's time to maybe not chase this and not follow Will Ulfgood down the path. And so the movie was always something I enjoyed. It was always a special place in my heart. But I didn't interact with it like I did Star Wars. But hearing the news that they were going to do this series, I was really excited for the people involved. And big Warwick Davis fan, big Aaron Kellyman fan because of Infant's Nest and a lot of the other people involved. We got our Gat-Cord half hands in this series. So I was just excited that a property that is loved by a lot of people is coming back, and I was all for it. But I was like, cool in that way of like, yeah, awesome. We'll get there when we get there. then the trailer came out at Celebration Anaheim, and I got to tell you, I was surprised and kind of blown away what I was seeing in terms of like, okay, they're doing this, they're doing this. So I went in with a good, solid high temperature to your question. I'll say this right now, I really enjoyed it. I think it does everything it needs to do, but this is one of those times where I'm like, I don't have a passion for it as much as I do other shows. This is a podcast feed about Game of Thrones, which I have a great passion for. Lord of the Rings, I have a great passion for. This one, I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about it. But there's some things that I struggle with, and some things where I'm like, you know what, this show did exactly what you'd want it to do, and I'm not connected with it as much, but others do. And I'm here to talk about what's in the show that is for everybody. And that's, I just want to be honest where my point of view is going in. And I think they have done a great job.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where it's like your mileage may vary on so many choices that they make. One of those things is the comedy style that they've decided to embrace.
Yep.
Some of the modern elements. We were talking a little bit off air about how with some of these younger characters, it's sort of in the same way that '80s Val Kilmer, who we should address, his presence hangs over this show. Of course, for real life reasons, he's not able to be involved. They have made some interesting quotes about still looking to the future for ways he could be if this were to continue. But we're not here to discuss maybes, but Matt Mardigan is still a huge plot factor, even if Val, couldn't be involved. And again, for real life reasons, the guy's a trooper and I love him and wish him all the best. But it's an interesting sort of tracking of like in 1988, he was a 1988 type of hero.
Yeah.
He wasn't doing an English accent. Willow was not doing high fantasy. It was doing high fantasy tropes, but in a very quippy, sort of weird, sort of very George Lucasy way. I mean, you've got the brownies yelling and screaming the entire movie, and all of that comedy is there. So if you're taking that and making it 2022, then it will be a brother and sister, dunking on each other for one of them sleeping around and the other one breaking rules. And some of that feels very modern. Some people I would say, and I don't, this is not a comment on what I think of it, but you hear it's very CW thrown around or very like young, and it is, but it's an interesting situation of like, sometimes we have to look at shows and ask, what are they aiming for? And what are they trying to be versus what we maybe expect?
Yeah. This is where a great discussion point to begin for me, because I did rub up against some of the humor, particularly in the first episode. But that said, you're not wrong about what the '88 series was. You got Pollock and Rick Overton, two great stand-up comics back in the day. I think people forget that Pollock started there, and Overton's great. I've done shows with Overton. Like, these are two '80s comics doing high sketch comedy type of material. Yeah, you're right. And I think this is thing where this is me, Alden, having to really practice what I often preach to others about. Hey, maybe drop some of your expectations, drop your feelings of you're not pulling a lot from this, because I didn't walk away from these episodes like inspired, but other people did. Other people brought joy, and I need to meet the show where it's at and with what it's trying to do. And I think you're right. I think some of the humor didn't work for me in the sense of it's not even just the words, the cadence, the rhythm. It was very hey, so we're gonna get married. That's weird. I got it. Those are moments I don't love. But also, this is what it needs to do. I'm not a parent. I'm choosing not to be a parent. If I had a 13-year-old, I'd be like, sit down and watch this. You're going to enjoy it. And I love that the show did it. And I think you're right. This is what you would want out of Willow, a sequel, a series, including the humor. And I think it needed to be that for the show.
Yeah, I mean, because an element of Willow, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in our last live episode a couple weeks ago, and then at the time of this recording, just now when Nikki and I revisited the film, it's an interesting situation of when people say, "Oh, well, that one, it wasn't as good as Princess Bride, it wasn't as good as Legend, it wasn't as good as like Lady Hawk, or like any of those, whatever, pick any of them."
Any 80s,
any 80s. Oh, Willow was fine. Certainly not as good as Star Wars or Indiana Jones. It's too cheesy, and I'm like, well, the cheese is built in, and it's like that. I would almost rub against it if they tried to make the self-serious Willow follow-up. Like, what I love about what John Kasdan did here is he didn't make Willow in a way that was, I want to make what I liked as a kid cool now that I'm a Hollywood screenwriter. He was like, no, I'm just going to do what I remember. Like, I'm going to do what it was.
Yeah, it's a wonderful revisiting of the world, but also bringing some new things forward. We're going to talk about. They did some great updates to the characters where they've been. But you made me laugh about the humor. Again, it's not even that I think it's bad. I think I think it does what it's wanted. It's just I'm at a point in my life where like it didn't hit. But you mentioned like Princess Bride. I'm one of those big Princess Bride fans. I'm a William Goldman screenwriting fan.
Mhm.
He's got a very at the time is 87. It's still timely. He's got a very modern, timely anti-Vietnam joke in it, like
Mhm.
with Wallace Shaw's character. So that's why I don't like to hold up that weird double standard. We all have things that you might rub up against. You and I talk about Star Wars, big ass door, boyfriend got a cute boyfriend, or yeah, a yo mama joke on the phone. Like I expect people to have different takes on it. I'm a comic. You're not going to hit with not every joke's going to hit. So that said, I think you're right. I think if they had come up with serious gritty Willow, we'd be like, "What the hell are you doing? That's not Willow.
Yeah.
That's
Or
Willow."
even just serious gritty is something that happens a lot now, and people almost want that too much, or they don't understand what those terms mean. But even if they had done something still family friendly, but self-serious in a good way,
Yeah,
like Rings of Power, which we always also covered
yeah,
here and we will continue to cover, that even wouldn't have been Willow. Like we talked about a little bit off air. The
that.
first episode is definitely let's establish all of our new players, and then they're gonna meet Willow. Boom, big reveal, and then we're into the second one. Once
Mhm.
you get Warwick Davis in there, everything about that first one and everything we know about those young people starts to sing more
Yep.
because the original wink, wink, nod, nod, snarky star of the first one is now there
Yeah.
to elevate, to make fun of the young people, to push up against them, but also to mesh with them. And that's when it started to sing more, I think. I liked the first one, but I really love them together. And I'm glad they were released
Mhm.
together. That's always a
Works.
conversation of are they doing it creatively or are they doing it because the early punch of double views is good for business? But
Yeah.
sometimes that works out both ways.
Yeah.
This one
You
played really well as a two-part pilot.
you can't separate the business from it, but just enjoy this part of it. You get 2 episodes. No, and I think it worked. I think I definitely enjoyed the second episode more than the first, but first episodes are always hard, right? Come on. You can throw all the table setting pieces on the board, punditry around first episodes, but this first episode's pretty solid. But the second episode, when Warwick really starts to slide into this character where he is in his life, I really big fan of Warwick, and I just loved his ability to shine in that moment. I don't need Willow Ulfgood. It's so funny, Alden, because I even saw and heard some other people's expectations going in. It's like some of them thought that Willow maybe that lacked Willow himself. There was some
Mm,
gravitas to the character missing. I was like that's not Willow Ulfgood. I think the appeal of Ulfgood is he is not the Bilbo Baggins. I'm not. He's not, man. He's
yeah.
just yeah. Let Willow be Willow, and he is.
Yeah, and that's part of, having revisited the film, looking at it, Willow's a young family man in that one. He's a
Yeah,
young couple of small kids, farmer. Like his story is one of lacking confidence and finding it. It's feeling
yeah,
inadequate and then feeling like you're good enough. He's never, even at the end, Willow doesn't win in a way that's very modern. Especially talking to Nikki about it, who was a first time viewer. There's a moment at the end of Willow 88, spoilers. Although, I'm sure you've seen it if you're here watching the sequel show coverage. Wand hits the ground. If that was made now, the wand would have flown into Willow's hand and it would have been his epic moment. But
yeah,
Ron Howard stayed true to the character that he established. And how does Willow win? With sleight of hand. Like
yeah,
he's still a cheeky, sort of trying to just make his way, kind of a jokester, but kind of sarcastic and sassy. Him and Val Kilmer's chemistry that entire time is
yeah.
is very much that dynamic, and they found it again here. And I guess we'll start with these ideas of Willow,
Mhm.
with these ideas of where his character's at. Willow and Sorsha being the two legacy characters that are here. And again, Mad Mardigan, like we said, can't be part of the story for real life reasons, but is part of the plot for
Mhm.
sure in terms of why he's not there. But for who they were able to get to return, you also have the character of Nims, who was Willow's daughter, this time being played by Warwick's actual daughter, Annabelle Davis, which was great. They have some great touching moments.
Yeah.
For the people that returned, legacy sequels are big right now. We're
Mhm.
running out of things to legacy sequel because we've done so many.
Hey,
Uh, Biggest movie of the year right now, Top Gun. So like it tells you where we're at. We're big Star Wars fans. We've done it there. Indy 5 on the way.
yeah.
But they made some interesting choices that I would love to
Mhm.
know your opinion on,
Yeah.
where Willow and Sorsha, it's not like there's bad blood, but there's a disagreement that happened before the show that is told to us out of sequence. It's a little bit vague right now. If I have one criticism, or one thing that I'm, struggling with, but I'm sure we'll come together later, which is the thing about serialized television coverage, people, is that, a lot of the things where you're like, I don't know about that. It's like, yeah, you're not supposed to.
You're not
Um,
supposed
who knew what when, how much was
Yeah,
shared, because we find out that Willow's vision was much worse than maybe it was originally thought to be. So there are
yeah,
elements that we'll get into plot wise, but taking Willow and Sorsha to these places of fear and feeling
yeah.
burdened and feeling maybe like they didn't make the right calls and all of those things,
Mm,
versus maybe something like Top Gun Maverick or like the Ghostbusters sequel where it's like, yeah, they're still busting, or yeah,
mm,
I'm still flying. It's a different tone. This was more like Willow, the Force Awakens, where it's like, Han went back to his old ways and made mistakes. How did you feel about seeing him framed that way?
I actually really enjoyed that, and simply because I had, especially during the second episode where it really hits, I had that feeling where I was like, "Why is Sorsha such an a-hole? Like,
Hmm.
what's happening?" And I think that's very clearly part of the thematic point. I think when we get to the deeper themes here, I'll talk about I'm not a parent. I don't wanna pretend that I am, but there's a lot of stuff for parents in this show, which
Hmm.
is very interesting because I'm the outlier. I think most of the kids in my class of 1988, in 6th grade probably are parents, maybe even
Yeah.
grandparents. So this show is also speaking to them, and I think you needed that, and it was really interesting to find that there was a break in their union, so to speak, a break in their friendship, this fear, and how much of it is based out of protectiveness, which is that line parents have to ride.
Hmm.
And it was interesting to me. And I think that's what you needed. If it had all been that 80s ending, you pick up again, and this is, looking across the Force Awakens too. You pick up the big ending, everyone's danced and celebrated, and all pieces fall into the realm. How do you continue those stories? You got to have big bads, you got to have this and that. I think this fear of, and what you said, did we make the right decision? Ask me again in 10 years, Tyrion will tell you. Now we are 20 years on in the timeline of the story. I think it's a fair question to ask. Was this choice the right thing to do? It's a great starting point for these two legacy characters.
Absolutely. I think that having the older generation's decisions based in a little bit of fear, a little bit of paranoia, I think tracks beautifully with what we know about them, because I think this show is a good jumping on point. They
Yeah.
edit in old footage from the original
Yeah.
film. They do a storybook prologue. Even episode two continue. I thought maybe the storybook was just for the first one, but they kept it going, which I like. It's a
Mhm.
nice way to set the tone. It feels very
Yep, they
family
do, yeah.
friendly, and
Mhm.
anyone can pick it up. But when you do know Willow and Sorsha, because it's not just another Willow adventure. It is Willow 2. It is still
Yeah,
the
yeah.
arc of Alora Dana, and it's still everything that, they even say the blood of Bavmorda, her spirit never went away. All of that stuff still lingers. When you think about them, it starts to track more and more, because it's like, yeah, Sorsha wasn't just, the Princess Leia of that movie. She was an evil princess when the
Yeah.
movie started, and she turned good and had to defeat her mother. That's a heavy toll. These kingdoms that she is now trying to unite, which we'll talk about when we get into the Kit storyline, as well as her brother
Mhm.
Eric. And Willow, his whole story of, am I good enough, of inadequacy, of not being sure, of being reduced, of being looked down on. That
Mhm.
88 movie, he's called Peck like 30 times. People are
Yeah.
constantly using derogatory language against him. Like, he's got a little bit of chip on his shoulder. And by the time we start to realize what's actually going on, we realize that they're both acting out of fear. He had a
Yeah.
dream where he tells, that we find out it's doled out to the viewer over a few scenes, that bad is coming. It's a very like classic hero has a vision of magic,
Yeah.
darkness is coming. And so he's has something to propel him forward. What we find out later, of course, is that it would come with some sort of sacrifice, and there's the prophecies played with a lot in this world. Some of them
Yeah.
are true, but they're not true the way you thought they'd be, which is very classic myth. But to take them both to places of fear and overprotectiveness, like you said, to the point where there's even a barrier keeping the
Yeah.
youth, keeping the generation in the realm where they have no idea what's going on out there. Similar to Ned Stark in that other show that we cover, like, did you actually prepare them?
Yeah.
Or did your fear and your experiences stifle growth?
Yeah. I never thought I'd see the similarities between Willow and M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, where don't go, don't go out there, don't go past
Yes.
the wall. It's
Yeah.
all 1870 here, wherever it took place in that time period. Yeah, no, I love that. I thought it was interesting. And again, when you're going to start these stories up and bring them back, especially when they all end happy, I'm always interested in how you do that. And I think it was a victory for the show. I'm exploring because I'm curious because I don't know. I want to know. I'm not just sitting there going, well, that's weird. They made Sorsha a jerk. No, there's going to be reasons we're going to find out there. And same with Willow.
Yeah, I mean, I have here like it's not just Willow versus Sorsha. It's what Willow knows, what Sorsha knows, and
Yeah.
what they're projecting, and
Yeah.
what
What
they
they
are.
feel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what they feel in the situations because Sorsha might think, in this flashback falling out that we see that she might think nothing of the comment of like Willow, but you're not a great sorcerer because that's only a few years out from the movie and like
Yeah.
she loves him and she's happy to see him, but she also is saying the real greats, they're gone. This is a post
Mm,
great era. This is the post golden age in a certain way where
yeah.
they fought to defeat evil, but Shalindria, the great fairy, gone.
Yeah.
Rizal, the sorceress, is gone. And for Willow to hear that, I think the way I interpreted that is he's projecting the events of the first film into that conversation and saying, but we
Mm,
won. Like, why are you
mm,
doubting me? I thought we were friends, and there is
yeah.
no Mad Mardigan there to speak for him or believe in him. And it's sort of like Sorsha and Mad Mardigan had a relationship, but it's like if you sometimes you remove the friend that
Mhm,
made you
mhm.
friends with the other person,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, do we have a bond ourselves? And
Not the
how they
same.
disagree. And that
Mm,
first film comes down to the essential question of do you love this child is what starts Willow's journey. Do you
yeah.
feel love for this child? And to see Willow angrily yelling, I'll never come back here after this disrespect. That child's just as much mine as she is yours. All of that
Mm,
really hit me. It was shocking because I didn't think Willow had that in him to be
yeah.
sort of wrathful and bitter. But I also, putting it in the perspective of that's him then. It's like when we've
Yeah.
experienced old Luke Skywalker, but when we go back to Book of Boba Fett Luke Skywalker, we have to push out the sequels and say that's him then.
Yeah.
And it was really
Absolutely.
interesting to do that.
No, it's a great starting point for these characters. And I, for one, going into the series when it was first announced, not going into the series, when finding out Joanne Whaler was going to be involved, like, yeah, that could have been surface level, right? She shows up, waves, hands off a sword, and you're done. And to
Just the
have her,
queen.
yeah,
Yeah.
to have her here for some meaty scenes, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll talk a lot more about how they interact thematically, character based,
Yeah.
in terms of comedy, in terms of a lot of the different things. There's a lot of world building. And it's something that I took away from the first one is I forgot how dense that 2 hour movie is. There are
Mhm.
I think I bullet pointed them for a friend yesterday. I think there are 12 subplots in that first Willow, and
Mm,
it's a miracle that it's coherent. When you like, there's two prophecies, there's a
mhm.
royal beef, there's a rebellion, there's a magical rivalry, there's just all this stuff going on. These different creatures and races,
Right.
and it's surprising like that
Yeah.
George didn't try to make that a trilogy like he did Star Wars and Indy,
Right.
later a quadrilogy with Indy. But it's almost like this show also does that. There's a lot of different drops. You get the Chimerian Curus quest that Matt
Mhm.
Mardigan went on.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
the Calidorn and Tira are now going to be unified. It throws a lot your way. What is the barrier? What does the barrier encompass? Oh, it's the realm. Okay. Oh, you're the kind of the Kingsguard guy of this, but you're also important. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that I feel could have gotten a little bit out of control, but I thought that it was reined in and we'll talk about these characters, but I felt like it did a good job, and I'm curious as to your opinion on this, of making it character first, and it earned trust in me really quick, where it threw a lot of terms out, but
Yeah.
I was liking these people enough to say, well, I don't really know what that is, but I know what it is as a character.
Yeah, it's here's how it works. It's been about a year plus since I sat and watched Willow, and prior to that, probably about 25 years.
Hmm.
So I'm not versed in all the realms like I am Seven Kingdoms and Essos and Beyond or Star Wars, and it doesn't hold me up because it's just kind of you sit back and kind of go, it's world building, like I said, and even the names of the characters. I'll figure it out when it matters. Right now, what matters is my heart, the themes, and the story moving along. And I know who I know. And I thought it built it out wonderfully in that regard, but it never hung me up. Never hung me up. It's always going to be characters first, and I think that's how you win here. And I thought it did a great job. Even though I've got the cast list up right now because I just want to make sure like I'm getting all the names right because there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was the same thing with Rings of Power, and it'll be the same thing here, and with House of the Dragon, frankly, with all those
Mhm.
Valyrian names. But running them down here, our key new characters and a couple side ones. We've got Kit Tanthalos, one of the children of
Mhm.
Sorsha and Matt Mardigan. We have Jade, played by Erin Kellerman of Solo fame. She's
Mhm.
an up and coming knight. We have Borman, who starts off and we think he's a criminal, and then we find out, well, he is, but he also used to be more and has some connections
Mhm.
to Mad Mardigan, Val Kilmer there. We have the character of Dove, who we will get into, as that is one of 3 names that she has in this show.
Yeah.
We have Prince Graydon, and then we have some other faces such as the Gales, which are these 4 sort of horsemen of the apocalypse for this creature called the Crone we've yet to meet. One of them played by Chewbacca himself, Jonas Swatomo. We have Silas, who's sort of the other Nelwyn that goes with Willow. He's sort of Willow's. He looks like a trusty friend. He pretends to be Willow. He's kind of like Willow's security.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
enjoyed him. Nims, who was Willow's daughter in the first film in a minor role, is here now in a much bigger role. Like you said, played by Annabelle Davis. So lots of stuff going on here. I'm going to give you my read on some of these themes, and then you tell me where you want to go. In
Let's
terms
do it.
of Kit, I see
Mhm.
things like freedom and identity. With Jade, duty, dedication, and as Ballantyne says, knighthood is defined by your oaths, not your weapons and not your deeds. With Borman, there's definitely something with redemption and purpose, and this unspoken you owe Mad Mardigan something, and that's a mystery that is intentionally left there. So definitely some sort of debt to be paid. He's brushing off a darker past with comedy. With
Mm.
Dove, who we find out's been going by the name Brunhilde her entire life, but is really a Laura Dan and the baby from the first film. She's the one. She's even called the one. She's the chosen
One.
child. Destiny,
Yeah.
choice, the idea of covering up one's identity and thinking and taking away their choices. Even as a little girl, we get that note that someone's been dyeing her hair so that she's
Yeah.
not recognizable. And Willow says, well, when you were a baby, you had red hair. So there's all this. It's light and it's fun and it's comedic, but they took all of her agency away from her in the spirit of protecting the world. And then with Prince Graydon, who probably has so far the least to do,
Mhm.
we get some funny lines of like, well, there was another prince. He fell out of a tree and now he's the prince. And this guy's dealing with expectations.
Yeah.
You get the idea that his father's kind of disappointed in him. He seems like he's way more interested in books than he
Well,
is ruling or women or any of that stuff.
yeah. Anything. Yeah.
And I think all of those ideas is just like boom, 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 boom. Here's everything that Jonathan Kasdan could think of that young people deal with. And he divvied it up between characters. So who
Yeah.
latched out to you who stuck out to you as a standout that you
Yeah.
latched onto
Yeah.
for those ideas?
First of all, I love the way you phrase that as if John was like, what do kids do? What do kids do these days? Let's talk about the Utes. No, you well done summary of the big points there. I really, I am naturally going to be drawn to Aaron Kellyman, is a big fan of Memphis Nest, and I'm doing some scouting here to make sure Aaron's good to go for Infus, right? We got our Infus Nest series that we all want here, and I really love the city because she brought a lot of kind of warmth. To this kind of traditional kind of trope of you could even look at it as simple. I don't think the show does, but as simple as a woman in a man's world. I'm going to be knight. They make an exception for me. This is what I want to do, and there's great dedication. I'm subject to the queen, she says at one point. But there's a great warmth in it. There's a great love, and I think she's more mature than anyone else there right now. But we'll see when that's challenged. I'm curious to see when that personal connection to Kit is challenged in a way that we haven't seen yet. What she's going to do, and understanding, almost like a writer has to live both sides of the page. You have this you have this dedication thing going on. You have this honor, this title, this knighthood you kind of want, but what does it really mean and who are you really fighting for? We'll see how that changes. I was naturally drawn to that one there. Everyone else is solid as well. I did see it, and Tony Revolori maybe won me over a little bit by the end of the second episode when he finally got to see what he's doing. Because you're right, he's I would say just simply comic foil up until that point, but that scene around Dove, we'll say,
Mhm.
where he's being not only very nice, I think there's some implied attraction there as well too, but just like he's very understanding, he's very empathetic, and has not had that himself. The bookworm thing is also kind of a trope as well, but it's played really well here, where not only will he find his courage or strength to go do these tough things on the road, no, he's probably going to find out himself. No, he knows himself. He'll learn to know himself, and he'll find the confidence to be himself. I thought that was a sweet moment too. Later on, well, up until then, he had some funny lines, but he is just kind of designed to be the prince, and I thought that was a good development.
Yeah, I agree. I think his starting point is one of my favorite funny beats that he has is I forget the exact wording, but his father's like, "You would let your wife to be go on
Yeah,
this journey by herself," kind of questioning his manhood because
yeah,
medieval setting, and there is a little bit of that patriarchalness thrown in with the knighthood. I think it's called the Shining Legion that
yeah,
Jade will be training with. So you get the idea, like. This is a fun fantasy world. It's no Westeros, but it does still have its problematic people. And his father is sort of like, you would let her go, and he's like, I mean, I would learn to live with it. Like he's
yeah,
he's not an adventuring prince. Doesn't look like he's
yeah,
ever held a sword, let alone swung one. And it's
yeah,
it's an interesting sort of way to assemble a classic party, a fantasy
yeah.
party. I think Kit even has a line where she's like, "Yeah, I think that's it for the Fellowship." Like even like a little Lord of the Rings nod. Like, yeah, we're good. We don't need more people. But yeah, I love what you said about Jade and about Graydon, about
Great.
Graydon sort of taking, because it is play with tropes, right? Willow
Yeah,
does play with tropes in and of himself and his
yeah,
entire world. It was hard for us to watch that first film and not just see Luke and Han again. I think I tweeted this, like, you've got farmhand turned wizard and rogue turned
mhm,
general, and that's one of
yep,
George's favorite friendship pairings. And
yeah,
the way that Mad Mardigan even says to Willow, um, "This is war, Willow, not agriculture," which is basically Justin Crops back home, kid. Like it's that
right,
exact same thing. But seeing these tropes
yeah,
change different ways, starting with Jade, I love what you brought up about how it could have been something that we'd seen before, and it was in certain ways. I have this duty, I'm trying to
sure,
be more.
yeah,
We've in fact seen her struggle before with someone like Brienne of Tarth over in our Game of Thrones
yeah,
fandom of,
yeah,
can I be the exception? But this being a more welcoming world, they have made it for her. She didn't have
yeah,
to go fight zombies to get it. I loved how that started to play with a theme that you, Joseph, and Jennifer have actually been touching on a lot on Force Center with Andor, which is the duty and the cause versus the personal. And that's where her
mhm,
and Kit are clashing, where we get here and we're not sure if this is will they, won't they? We're not sure if
mhm,
this is we are dating. We're not sure if this is we want to date, but we can't. It's ambiguous as to where the relationship is, but it is one. They kiss on screen.
yeah, yeah,
It is Lucasfilm's first definitive, no questions asked. Because even with Vel and Cinta and Andor,
mhm,
it's more ambiguous than some people would like, and I would completely understand and agree.
yeah,
This is not ambiguous at all. They're a romantic couple, but Kit is clashing with her because she feels like, wow, you would leave me when I need you emotionally.
mhm,
Whereas, as Valentine points out, from Jade's point of view, it's, well, if she really cared about you, she'd understand that you're pursuing your goals. And
mhm,
I feel like that, fantasy or not, is so understandable. It's so
mhm,
relatable,
mhm,
either in romantic relationships or just in relationships in general, of
yeah,
how both people can approach things from a perspective of, but you love me, how could you
yeah,
not get this? Because you love me. And I look at both of these women in the show and I'm like, you're both right. I understand you both.
yeah. It's I love it. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see to get a little bit even more from this world on what the world views their relationship, right? Because it's I think until the kiss, which is this great thing, of course. But until then, I was like, is it ambiguous because it needs to be in this world? And she's got this prearranged, marriage. She's betrothed to old bookworm over there, and I was curious how they'd play it. But I think when you talked about like Valentine's speech and everything, I'd love to see it dealt with in a different way where no, it is accepted and it is treated as normal in this world as it should. And we're going to see how it actually truly affects them, where it's not this secret. It's something they actually have to deal with in this relationship. Because I do think, especially for show design, to speak to a younger audience, they need to see that. They need to learn that hard truth in relationships, the compromise, the duty versus the personal. What's the hard truth, what you're really fighting for, and who's being selfish and who's being not. It's complicated. It got wonderfully complicated for me to watch that.
Yeah, and it doesn't condemn either of them, which I really liked. I think that
Right.
sometimes for the sake of drama, we'll write characters in ways that one of them does something like wholly unreasonable. And it's like, well, that's just to get us to the next
Mhm,
argument or the
mhm,
next
mhm,
moment of
mhm,
reconciliation. But when Kit wants to run away, you understand her. When Jade is hesitant about telling her about her new assignment, you understand her too.
mhm,
All the viewpoints I think are really well fleshed out in terms of this group, and even when you're left in the dark intentionally for certain things, and there
mhm.
are nitty gritty writing things where a couple times I think like it was like, okay, this person's not saying it just because we need the moment later. Like
Yeah,
there's an interesting beat, for example, when Kit expresses her theory about her father. And she says, I think my father left with Alora Dannon and took her far away and stayed with her. And you've got Borman sitting there who knows the truth about her father, but doesn't
yeah,
say it until the scene he needs to say it. There's a little bit of that.
yeah,
Where it's
yeah,
like, that's TV. Like sometimes I'll forgive a little bit of unnatural response. Maybe he warmed up to her between scenes,
yeah, yeah.
and decided to tell her when he told her. But
Mhm,
their viewpoints, so I think, are fleshed out. And you're right. I think that Jade brings a level of maturity to the group. She was a standout. I think
mhm,
Aaron Kellerman has a similar thing that I've described with Matt Smith, even pre House of the Dragon with his Doctor Who days, where she feels like she's got a lot of years behind her eyes. She feels like
mhm,
she
mhm,
wisdom beyond her years, and the way that Jade takes things seriously, both as a
mhm,
girlfriend slash ambiguous lover, whatever their status is, and
mhm,
as an aspiring knight, and as a friend, and as a member of this group. The way that she believes in the word of others. That's something that's so big in this show too,
mhm.
is trust and the ability to trust, and how
Yeah,
Willow um is, he takes charge as he should. They were sent to find him and he knew they were coming and he's got all this knowledge, but the group not trusting his word about Alora Dannon and about what's going on, but Jade does. And
mhm.
Jade is sort of
Yeah,
our stalwart, sort of Jedi-esque figure that's like, no, I'm going to look for her, in that second episode, because Willow said that we need to find her. Like she's very
yeah,
driven by the cause, whereas Kit is very driven by the personal. And can they synthesize those two things? Because it's
yeah.
not like Kit has a goal, which is what I was interested in.
Mhm,
Let's move
mhm.
into her, I guess, as one of
Yeah,
our leads. Kit and her twin brother Eric, who was, for fans of the original film, Eric is the name of Mad Mardigan's soldier friend who perishes
mhm,
in the last battle. So a nice little nod there that he was named for his father's friend. They are these young, sort of spoiled royals. They're not mean, but you
yeah,
just
yeah.
get the idea that they're kind of aimless.
Mhm.
And when Kit wants to run away, it's not like she has a plan. She just wants to run away from expectation, which I think is a big thing with both
Yeah.
her and with Graydon. So how did you feel about the theme of the youth having to deal with what is expected of them, and even Kit down to saying, wow, so now you're even picking what I wear?
I thought it was, these are Mad Mardigan's kids, right? By the way, Dempsey Burke is Prince Eric. I mean, I for a second thought, is this Val Kilmer's son? Like he had
Yeah.
great casting on it there, and Ruby Cruz as well. Yeah, I thought, could you touch upon it? Like they could very easily be real spoiled shits, quite frankly,
Mhm.
which wouldn't seem right for Sorsha as a parent. So I thought it was played very nice, and I like their chemistry. As tropey as the prince who gets around and doesn't see the full weight of his title and his responsibility. Yeah, I get that there. But no, I'd like a little bit more. define goals for Kit, but I think again that's part of the journey, right? Like we don't quite know. Maybe she's working through it too. I see a little, impetuous and some base level jealousy, and also focused on saving her brother as she should be. So I'm waiting to see that kind of develop. But I thought the both castings were great, and that's a lot of weight. You can't have Mad Mardigan around. You got to have his kids, and I thought there's some chemistry emerging with these two.
Yeah, and I think that they handled the weight of legacy in a big way, in a really strong way with the
Mhm.
two of them, and with Nims, with Willow's daughter. Seeing these people
Yeah,
interact with their parents, like Willow's daughter being way more well-adjusted than Mad
yeah,
Mardigan and Sorcerer's kids definitely tracks.
yes,
I thought that her scene was really lovely, and seeing these people dealing with the absent parent, or deal with a parent that is maybe making the wrong choices from their
yeah,
perspective is really interesting. And neither side is condemned. It's not like the old people are wrong. Let's go out on our own and prove
yeah,
them wrong. But conversely, it's not the young people are stupid. It gets to the point where, Sorsha does give the blessing. She says, I agree with you. You do need to go get your brother. And I think
mm,
that that was a nice way to sort of embrace some of the thematic energy of
mm,
there's a middle here that we're not finding. There's a communication that's missing
yeah,
a lot of the parties. And I think that it's natural because, again, some of this is non-linear storytelling. It's natural for Sorsha to say, I agree with you, to her daughter, because Sorsha, we know later, is also reflecting on, I should have listened when I had the chance and maybe we wouldn't be
mm,
here.
yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, again, there's a lot of things to me, the parenting, or at least if it's not, directly, I can't relate to the parenting thing, but the mentors, the older generation, um, finding the best way forward, knowing that maybe they themselves didn't take the best way forward. So I like that.
Yeah, and a lot of them also dealing with this theme of isolation, which I thought was really interesting. We know that, as we've
Yeah, yeah.
said, it's arranged marriage. Since the events of the first film, at some point in Elora Danon's childhood infancy, they put up this barrier. And the barrier was crafted through powerful magic of people that are no longer around. And it's ambiguous as to what it covers, but they
Mhm.
say the words the realm, and we know that they want to unite this realm. So we can assume there's at least two kingdoms in there if you're
Yeah, yeah.
playing along and trying to get your lore right. But the idea that not only did they do that, but once we got to Willow's village and it looked like it was destroyed, but then you
Mhm.
find out that it's because he moved them underground, that's
Right.
when I thought, oh, so it happened for everyone. Like all
Yeah.
of the different, no matter if you're a big person or a Nelwyn, a
Mm.
Daikini as they call them, you everybody reacted to the events of those first film or to their dreams and prophecies with paranoia, and they decided
Mhm.
not to face their problems head on,
Yeah.
which
Right away.
affects everybody. It affects the youth, it affects the culture, it affects the world. And I think that, as Lucasfilm is known to do, commenting on our world right now,
Mm.
burying your head in the ground, in the sand, literally in the ground if you're Willow, is not the way. And I think that's why I
Yeah.
thought I loved the scene where his daughter, if we're talking about the parents and children, where his daughter challenges him, that isolationist versus
Mhm.
it's not isolationist versus globalist. It's not that one to one with our world, but it's like,
Mhm.
no, Dad, like you used to be more. And when she says you've always been my hero, Warwick does a great joke there. Like, I would have gone on a quest earlier, if I knew that you would say that. But yeah, I thought that was really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And is in a
It
lot of our fantasy right now.
it's what you need, and here's the thing about what even Willow, going back to the original movie, like, I remember watching it a little bit later on, or even just kind of remembering, and it's like, George is definitely doing some Lord of the Rings stuff in his story, it's definitely that, but I don't I say that in a good way, where I think Willow needs to deal this world of Willow needs to deal with the same thing. This evil is allowed to return when you don't deal with it. That doesn't go away, and I like that Star Wars deals with it. I like that Tolkien was looking at that as he continued to maybe look at the adventures of King Elisar and everything that came
Yeah,
after,
yeah,
and I think he stopped short of it, and so therefore it seems like he didn't go that route. But I bet if he had still pursued it, that would have had to happen, where the evil people might be gone, but the idea or the concept of evil and the ability to do evil still exists, and it's going to return if you don't kind of deal with it. It's just it's the cyclical nature of it all there, and to see it so clear in this display here, particularly when this entire culture going underground, right? And hiding. And then I kept thinking of like the dogs. I'm like, well, I'd go underground too if those dogs just run into your village and destroy things.
Yeah.
But maybe that's another right way to deal with it. So to have that's a pretty big theme to hang over all of the show. To your point, of like, again, we're right after the events of we don't have this in a lot of other properties. We got comics and books and stories now, but we don't see Endor a month later or the Republic a month later after that. We're starting to see that now, but we didn't grow up with that. So I love when it's analyzed and Willow being like, all right, the flashback is even closer to the movie than you'd think. And this is the choices we made as a realm. It's a dangerous one potentially.
Yeah, and we talked about it with Star Wars, but even with Indiana Jones, we're recording these. Obviously, there is no Indiana Jones 5 yet, but what they've said about that film, it's like, yeah, it's Indy in 1969 when the space program sent man to the moon. But you know who was in the space program? Nazis that we ignored and that we let off on things. So this
Yeah.
is a theme right now. You're ignoring evil, and in those flashbacks, Willow
Mhm.
says, and again, we don't know how much of his dream he shares with Sorcerer, which is, the film
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the series is dropping its knowledge in ways that are serialized television ways. We'll
Mhm.
find things out, like episode 1 with Borman, who I really enjoyed, and we'll talk about Borman. She says, "Oh no, he'll accomplish this quest, and not for a royal pardon, and not for me, but for a debt to a friend." And I'm paraphrasing,
Mhm.
and you're like,
Mhm.
"What's that about?" And then you find out that he was Madmartigan's squire. So
Yeah.
all of these choices that happened, everything that she did, Sorsha feels like she doomed Madmartigan, but she also
Yeah.
ignored Willow saying it's time to train Elora Danan now. Evil's
Mhm.
not done. And, in Star Wars, like you've said, we've gotten that stuff filled in and we found out about some of the demilitarization and the ignoring of the slow
Mhm.
creep of fascism. Here, it's not as direct because it's not like it's
Yeah.
a regime. It's just dark
Yeah, yeah.
powers, but it's the same thing thematically. The idea that we thought that we could just do things the same way, and Willow returns to his village at the end of the first film, but then there's an ambiguous amount of loss that I thought was beautifully played. He used to have a wife, daughter, and son. Now he's
Mhm.
only got a daughter. They don't
Yeah.
seem to be around. He stops by their old hut as they're
Mhm.
leaving and has those flashbacks to where they found baby Alora, and
Yeah.
really beautifully played moment there by Warwick. And you get the idea that he's having to reckon with the fact that like he wanted to be a great sorcerer when he's young, but now 20 years later, he actually has to be one. He's no longer the kid. You
Mhm.
become your heroes, and he's no
Yeah.
longer the kid that found the fairy that gives the wand. Now he's the guy that has the wand, and he's the one being found.
It's fantastic. It's you're almost discussing adulthood, right? You're almost
Mhm.
discussing that the jokey term adulting, where he might have, he kind of wins the day and gets what he wants, and he's going to be a sorcerer, going to be a wizard, and you got to find out then you actually have to be it, and that's scary as well. So this series being again, this series knowing when I say made for a younger audience, I don't even know if that's correct. It's just doing what Will needs to do. But this is maybe going to pull in some younger folks. But for someone like me who's watching it, like, all right, I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to be a star, and then you got to go do that.
Mhm.
And then you to make your dreams come true, you got to work at it. Or then the worst, you actually get your dreams. You actually win the day. Sorsha actually defeats her mother. Actually, ascends to the throne. And then there's a whole bunch more problems. This show is about the adults in it just as much as the kids, and it was fascinating to watch it. I thought some of that was some of and then you don't know the whole story yet. You don't know all the pain Willow's facing and feeling. We're gonna maybe get that story, but right now all you need to know is loss, and that it's all too real. It's all too real, and that's something you got to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that being able to do sort of some of the nonlinear storytelling that they've embraced here was pretty smart because I've watched each episode twice, and on that rewatch, when you see certain choices or certain source scenes and the way that she treats her children, or in the way that she, when she tells Kit, part of that is of the parenting aspect of the show is putting the
Mm,
pressure upon the next generation, having to confront unfortunate In Scary Truths, she says, the blood of Bavmorda exists in me, therefore it exists in you and your brother. It never went away. Willow had this dream. Now I've had it too. Whether or not that includes that Elora Danan must die, we'll talk about her in a second, is ambiguous because it's when he tells that to Silas, it seems like it's the first time he's articulated it. We'll see as the show goes. The first time he's ever admitted that, because that was not even part of the first
whole dream.
Yeah, the whole dream, because we get a flash of it. The whole dream that she's dead. Another cool note there, when it's not cool that she's dead, but when she's dead in Willow's vision, her hair is dark again. So it's sort of that symbolism of, in this climactic battle, she will be what she was always supposed to be. And hair and color is such a big thing in like literary analysis and stuff. And Star Wars is a lot of that too. Like Obi-Wan, passing down the mullet to Anakin and things like that. But talking about Kit, we talked about Jade. Let's talk about Elora Danan /Dove /Brunhilde, which is an interesting thing where I hate to be I called it guy, but halfway through the first one, I thought to myself, something about that throwaway line about the brother not really knowing her name is interesting. And then when she crossed through that threshold, I thought, is she the baby? And then, sure as hell, Willow reveals her tattoo.
I was going to ask you this. Okay, so I hadn't been paying tremendously close attention to the marketing, other than saw the trailer. I had the sense, I was like tuning in episode 1 going, so I know Elora Danan's missing, but I think it's a secret, right? Like I knew that. And I was like, but clearly it's Kit. I don't know why. So when the real happened, I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. I probably should finish my coffee before I watch this episode.
No, I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's just enough that you can have fun being like, it is her, it is her. But also, especially for that younger audience, I think it'll probably be like, whoa, like mom, dad, she's the wizard. She's the, it has that.
It will work because again, like even early on, they, I think Eric calls Kit, your twin, or she says whatever, and I was like, well, they were raised to believe that, and I feel like in 2005 when there was some people who were like, Palpatine is the Emperor, like.
Yeah,
I felt slightly dumb, but also it worked on me. I actually really loved that moment because it worked on me. Just kind of catching the story casually, drinking my coffee, and was like, "Oh, there we go," and it made me want to go back and retake some of the scenes and lines that she said. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought it was a great reveal. I thought it was a great punchy, like modern in a good way sort of ending to that first one. Like she just goes, what? And then it ends on a pop song, like boom. And then we move into the next one. Her character, I think, was interesting because she has all these themes of destiny imbued into her art. She has, the classic, they might as well be doing Star Wars scenes at some point. You could tell it's a George Lucas property. Magic is is the lifeblood of the universe, or the bloodstream of the universe. All the stuff about it being
sorry,
belief
as if Yoda's talking to Luke, right? Literally,
100%. Yeah, I mean it's in you. It's about belief. He even tries to give her the answer to the finger riddle that he had to go through the first one. He's like, it's your finger, but she's not picking up on what that even means. I think it was a big swing, and I don't say this as an insult to the character at all, or to Ellie Bamber, who I think is doing exactly what she needs to do. But to make her, how do I word this? Like kind of goofy, kind of simple, kind of like not at all a comment like on her like faculties or capacity, but just she's like, oh yeah, my baking's phenomenal. I make good soup. I'm in love. I want to go get my boyfriend. Like she has all of these very like not what you expect of the mythic chosen one. And I think that was, I could see that being something that is maybe too modern for some people, and we could talk about it. But I think it's an interesting way because she needs to clash and mesh with Willow in a certain way, in the same way that he did with Mad Mardigan and Rizal in the first film. Whereas Willow wanted this, she was predestined for it and doesn't understand it. So then where do you go with that? Especially with Willow, who's also doubting himself. Willow's not at peace like Yoda is by Empire, so it's a different dynamic where he's like, he doesn't have the patience to teach and she doesn't have the patience to learn, which is a different way to do that.
Yeah, no, that's where the show really started working for me. Dolman's script in the second episode I thought was really strong, and in this way where like Warwick was allowed to kind of be Warwick while being Willow and bringing some of the humor that was present in Willow as well. I think he's really funny in Rye and sardonic and all that stuff. So that started to work, and her struggle was very real. The struggle was filled with some comedy and everyone kind of reacting to it. But I didn't need it. I didn't need it to be anything more than that. It's doing what
Mhm.
it needs to do and telling the story. But it's also an interesting take on it of, and watching the reveal was great. Again, it really truthfully did trick me. But then to see in the second episode of just like this character should be angry. And maybe I think she's got a little bit of it going on, but I want to see that play out of not only did you lie to me, you kept me around as a servant girl, which by the way, if that's your station in life, be the best one you can be. Like, I almost wanted someone to say her when she was like, I just want to cook. Like, you could just do that if you want to. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? In other words, like that's a bit of a mind tweak. And that's what I think weighs on Willow and Sorsha now that it's out. It wasn't just about protection, and we talk about the theme of fear over protection and the thin line between the two. But I thought that was one of the more interesting things for me. Of it wasn't just a fun, oh, the servant girl, it's the princess. It's like, and you had to watch all these high class people. You're lowborn,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah,
and
out of protection, you end up taking away someone's agency and choice, and that's so much a part of what
yeah,
everybody's going through, and everybody in their own way. That's what sort of binds the six together and binds all,
mhm,
especially the young people together. Is none of us feel like we have complete control. Like Jade just finally got this exception, but she still has to go do it while dealing with Kit. Kit is dealing with the fact that she's expected to be this thing that she's just to be a wife and just to be a queen and to be a tool to unite kingdoms. She's
yeah,
being used functionally,
yeah,
which Borman even calls Sorsha out for. He's like, at least you got to choose, Mad Mardigan.
yeah,
That type of stuff sort of comes to the forefront, but especially with her. And I think that we're not in the prediction game here, but that last beat of episode 2, it's a classic, irony thing, little bit of dramatic irony. When she finally does unlock the spell, it's in a
yeah,
moment of anger, and it's in a moment
yeah,
of frustration, and I think that some of that is bubbling to the surface, and you
mhm,
could tell she does take pride in what she can do. She's got the best
yeah,
muffins in the kingdom, and she says she's a phenomenal cook, and she's really proud to have this relationship with Prince Eric and wants to go find him and stuff and wants to be useful. And she says, I can tend to the horses, I can cook, I can
mhm,
help you guys. And but yeah, you're right. Like I am interested to see sort of when the themes come to the forefront for identity,
mhm,
how she'll struggle with being Brunhilde slash Dove, as Eric calls her, or being Alora.
yeah,
It's sad to know that it sort of happened in that way. Again, very Star Wars, knowing that this is all, we see it again based on characters created by George Lucas at the end. Like, we have it,
mhm,
we'll see that again with Indy, but it always comes back to those ideas that he's trying to unpack about generations. And much like how Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Bale did the best they could, we know that Willow and Sorsha did the best they could, but sometimes that's not best for the person. And Willow
no,
tried to undo it, and
yeah.
but he also knows that by undoing it, he could be dooming her to a big epic death. And so it's sometimes it's those rock and a hard place choices.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to move it a little bit into like the use of prophecy is always interesting in these fantasy things, and it's always about it's never quite the truth. It could be choices. Choice is still there. It's about how you react to it, and I think I love when it comes up. Star Wars, Game of Thrones, any world, Harry Potter,
Mhm.
whatever. And I loved looking at the series. And again, there were some timeline questions I had, which was more about me than the show and how soon they did this. Did they immediately put her into hiding and everything? And how much had to do with this vision and prophecy? And this goes into that mentor slash parent thing where you have this fear and the fear is natural. You want to keep them safe. You want to make sure she's up to the challenge to be this and then she doesn't get destroyed. We'll put this barrier up and we'll try to keep evil out. But you think of the Cat Stevens, baby, it's a wild world, and you're gonna
Mhm.
get out there, and to think about for parents, sometimes it's an attachment that is based in their fears, right? Of course, you don't want anything to happen to Laura Dan, and there's also a lot riding on the realm for that. There's a lot of that going on, a lot of high stakes. Of course, you don't want anything bad to happen to her, but it's not about her and her experiences and her possible end. It's about you have a fear of how you're going to react to that. So it
Mhm.
becomes this negative attachment that becomes destructive, and then you make decisions like this, including wrapping the realm up in a nice little cellophane bubble and taking away her agency. And then if it truly is that the prophecy was there, first again, I think it was. I'm missing some of the timeline notes there, but then this vision of her dying. No, of course, no one wants that, but you don't know that, and then you're so afraid that you're gonna cause more damage. You're causing this damage to her, and I think that's a deep parental theme, mentor theme. I gotta let you launch the Willow podcast on your own. You might die, Alden, but I gotta let you know. I gotta let you do it.
So let
I
me
gotta let you
fly.
do it.
Yeah, it's a huge it's a huge thing. I mean, it's like it hangs over that first film too. Sorsha
Yeah.
betrayal of her mother was prophesized.
Yes.
It's the secondary prophecy of that first film. It's the Elora Danan stuff, but then also her seers and her soothsayers are like, by the way, we think your daughter might betray you. And she's like, that'll never happen. And then it does. But a lot of these things, sometimes, as George R. R. Martin will tell you, prophecy is there to just make you think and to
Yeah.
be broken and to be, messed with and to
Yeah.
subvert. And so there's all these different interpretations of it. And again, we are still in the dark as to who knows what and when.
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
it stands in the first film, it's Elora Danan will be all these great things, queen,
Yeah.
sorceress, all these things, and will destroy evil. Great.
Neat.
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Cool.
solid. Awesome.
Got
Sounds
it.
great. And
They
we're fighting for the future. We're
Yeah.
fighting for Elora Danan in her 20s, in her
Yeah.
20s, 30s, and beyond. Now we're there. And at first, it's this vision of, Elora Danan will be the one. She needs to be trained. Then with the extra punch of, but she will die, it's this added element of, but we were supposed to take care of her. Is that out of our
Yeah.
hands now? What do we even control? And I think that plays a lot into the paranoia and into the decision making of both Willow and Sorsha as the two main parent figures. And Sorsha even says, like, the way that they write around Matt Mardigan not being able to be in the show is that he went to go find this
Mhm.
chimerian cuirass, or as Kit calls it, a magical breastplate,
Yeah.
to go do X, some magical artifact. And you get a little bit of a tease where Borman's like, yeah, he found it. And we still don't get the whole story. That
Yeah.
episode 2 ends when she asks him what happened. But it's an interesting thing to think about. Everybody is sort of just like clawing and desperately searching for the way that they don't have to face
Yeah.
the worst possible scenario.
Mhm.
Everybody feels like they're backed into a corner, which I think is superhuman.
Mhm.
Not superhuman, superhuman. And it's the whole idea of trying to work with what you have, which I think Willow has always been great at. I mean, one thing I love about their disagreement. Before I had watched episode 2, when I just watched 1, I thought it
Yeah.
was great that Sorsha said we disagreed about what to do. I wanted to
Yeah.
hide her, and I wanted magic to diminish. Whereas
Yeah.
Willow wanted magic to continue, wanted her to be trained. But when you find out, oh, she was hidden, but it was in plain sight, which is such a Willow thing, because his whole thing in the first film is sleight of hand. Like, it
Yeah.
is right in front of you. It's the disappearing pig trick, which she
Yeah.
then throws in his face. So Willow is a character that's always been able to work with what he has, but now he feels like it might not even be his calls to make, and I think that
Mhm.
that frightens him.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see sort of like Willow, the Last Jedi, but it kind of does feel that way in certain ways. I retreated because I felt like I had made the wrong calls.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes you do things. I mean, even the relationship between Sorsha and Willow, like I said earlier, like Sorsha's kind of an a-hole, but it's like it comes out of this paranoia, this thing, and so she's gonna say some things. What a mean thing to say to Willow, and then Willow's gonna react in a certain way. It trickles out,
Mhm.
and I just thought that was particularly interesting. A good way to play it.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, 100%. Obviously, that prophecy stuff plays in there.
Mhm,
Potential was such a big theme of the first film. We talked
mhm.
about that with the finger stuff. That was Willow's journey there. Here, everybody's trying to realize their best potential. It's very
Yeah,
classic young hero stuff. A couple other characters that had some stuff I wanted to talk about.
yeah.
whoever you wanted to jump to first. And we talked about Graydon a little bit, but we also have Borman. We also have this stuff going on with. I mean, first of all, rest in peace to Case or Kaz, played by Simon Armstrong, who is Corrin Halfhand. Did not make it far into the journey. But we have our other big general character, Ballantyne, who's been corrupted by evil and is being sent after them. So how did you feel about some of the stuff that was more like not ancillary in a bad way, but just like some of the side world building, some of the extra quest side characters?
Yeah, I would have taken an entire Corrin Halfhand Simon Armstrong series. Anytime we get Ralph Innocent, he's not going to play a good guy. Whether he's Finchy from The Office,
can't happen.
Yeah, First Night, Game of Thrones season 2 with Dagmar. So I was expecting that. I was just expecting it, and I thought it played out. And you need that kind of surface level big baddie leading to the other big bad. So that was kind of fun. But I did love the character Bourne. I do want to talk about Bourman. I thought a lot of when there were certain moments where some of the humor seemed to rub against me. It's a personal thing. And again, I think it worked. And I laughed out loud a few times. Tony Rivolori made me laugh. Borman made me laugh more than any of them. And I just thought it was played really well. And I got to shout out. I think anyone who knows me would be upset if I didn't mention this. They have in that horse chase a beat for beat call out to Young Guns 2, where I need to find out how it's got to be intentional, or else it's a big oops. But imagine Young Guns 2 came out in 90. So I got to imagine Kasdan is something about it, or I think Dolan wrote the script, but that horse chase and he's tossing out the word, and then they ask what that is. It's whatever it was for stop. That is exactly Young Guns 2. I absolutely popped for that and really appreciated that call out, because as it was happening, I was like, this is just like Young Guns 2. And then to have that. So Borman's behind a lot of that. I love the character.
Yeah, it was a really good beat, because in a show full of so much magic, you're about to go off a cliff, about to go into water, and you're so trained to think like, oh, he's got a secret. Like, is his horse about to like run on air? Like, what's about to happen? Nope, the horses end up in the water. It's just such a great anticlimactic moment that it worked really well. But yeah, I really like his character. I like a rogue who deflects with humor. I like that we get the slow reveal that, because at first it's an interesting thing. Like, why does Sorsha visit this prisoner? Why do they know each other? Why does she care? And then, oh, he has a debt to who? And then it's finally I was your dad's squire. Again, we could, I'm sure there are people that are really into like script structure and will knock that for him sort of bringing it up for no reason, just because he kind of needs to. I understand that. Sure. But yeah, I still thought it was a great moment, a great reveal. That actor is doing a really good job. Again, still learning lots of people's names.
Amar Shada Patel.
Yes, Amar Shada Patel is great. Like you said, Dempsey Burke was great. Prince Eric sort of gets captured. I know he'll be in the rest of the show, so we will see him again. He's in some of the trailer stuff. Again, perfectly cast as Val Kilmer's kid.
Stunning,
yeah, he looks just like both of them. And Joanne Whaley and Val Kilmer were together for a while. They do actually have a son, but maybe he was like, I don't need to be that on the nose for my career.
There's probably some other reasons Val's not around, but
Yeah. He's it's health, and also I wouldn't be there anyway.
Why weren't Braun and Cersei in scenes together?
Yeah, a little bit of that real world element there, but I think it was just the Hollywood of it all. I think it was a great example of writing around someone, and I think that sometimes fans maybe want that a little bit more. I remember those were conversations we had as Star Wars fans, and before we knew Lando would be in 9, people were like, well, can we at least mention why he's not in 7 or 8? Like, and I think that this was that handled about as elegantly as you could. He is still actively hanging over the plot. He's still important to several of the characters there in different ways. And Willow gets a touching moment about him that like not even death would keep him from you. That I'm paraphrasing, but a moment. But it's interesting to see sort of how dealing with the absent parent has sort of thrown them both off their path, Kit and Eric. And there's some tender moments of that, and there's tender moments too of just like nostalgic beats, like when you get Sorsha busting out her sword and the Willow theme kicks
Oh,
in. It
love
was
that.
great.
That sword's always that's one of my all-time favorite fantasy swords. It's not discussed enough in are there fantasy sword discussions out there? Maybe there isn't.
No,
I
there
love
probably
that
is.
moment, and she pulls it out and then pass it on. I love that.
Yeah, that was really good stuff. So as we start to wind down here, there's lots of stuff in terms of the actual world, in terms of the Nelwyn culture. There's a lot of beats that go on, little things that are just touched on but not fully fleshed out yet, just to enhance sort of the roles. We know that Willow has his own apprentice, which
Mm,
is a little bit of growth from the first film, where the first High Aldwin was not taking apprentices until Willow.
right.
There's lots of stuff that goes on in terms of these villains in this fight, which is probably an element that I know we haven't discussed and will probably be under discussed. And when Nikki and I revisited Willow 88,
Mhm,
we were like, this is like, especially when she turns them all into pigs and you get like the prosthetic makeup and all that, like that
mhm,
was pretty scary. And I'd imagine it'd be scary for kids. And these villains, including Jonas Swatamo as the Scourge, this bird
oh,
creature, this guy with the
mhm.
whips, these are excellently crafted horror fantasy characters.
I'm glad you mentioned that actually. Swatomo's The Scourge is great. That reveals awesome. But Neil Scanlon being involved in the design of a lot of stuff there. I gotta say, I thought that they were, especially in the first episode, which I was like, okay, cool. I get what's going on. They were the best part for me. The design. You got the one that looks like the mouth of Sauron, which I always enjoy
Mhm.
that design. They were wonderful and gave you kind of the little like chills there. So I can't wait to see more of that in a show that has this kind of cheery, bantery kind of. You even got Ruby Cruz at one point. Kit says, "Hey, I don't want to banter." It was a great
Mhm.
little kind of almost meta moment. You got that, and you got on the other side this really kind of gothic evil hanging over, and I did like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's extremely threatening. There's lots of I don't say info dump in a bad way, but info dumps in a fun way of like, well, we have to go beyond the Shattering Sea to the Immemorial City, the Crone. It's like all these things that are thrown out. They just gave
Yeah, yeah,
Warwick Davis a list of terms, and we're like, can you
yeah.
just say all this and act like you know what it is? And it all
But
worked
make
out
sure
really
it's
well.
faster, more intense. Yeah,
Yes, 100%. And he's slipped back into it so well, like we've been saying. The last sort of big idea I wanted to touch on for these two, because we could
mhm,
be here all night just picking out specific little moments or going beat by beat. But that's
mhm,
not really what we do here. If you're just joining us on Casterly Talk for Willow, you will quickly find that we just get in love with an idea, and we will just chase that theme, that idea, and everything. And so
yeah. It's
maybe
for
we
those.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, we can go beat by beat. We're not reviewers. We're discussing the themes, but because that's how you take it home with you, and that's how
Mhm.
it finds even me, who will say, this show didn't hit me in the heart as much as for other people. Like I enjoy discussing. I'm already even more interested in it based on discussions around the parental mentor units, just discussing with you. So that's why we approach it from this angle here, both in Game of Thrones, Rings of Power, and now Will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that last big idea that I got
Mhm.
tons of notes here. I got a whole scratchy notes page here.
Oh, that's some good notes.
The entire idea of belief is so central to everything that George Lucas was doing, everything that
Mhm,
he did with Bob Dolman and Ron Howard on that first film. Um, Elora Danan as a baby, something that I loved about that first film is that the fairy Shalindra tells Willow, Elora Danan already chose you as her guardian, even though she's a baby that can't talk. And it's just this belief in children.
mhm,
And for Willow to be now confronted with the baby that believed in him before she could even speak. And
mhm.
now he's questioning whether or not she was nurtured enough. That's something that he keeps
Mhm.
bringing up. And it's
Yeah.
the idea of belief being challenged by logic, right? By rules. And that's something that Star Wars deals with a lot, and Star Wars fans, we've talked about this a lot with the rules like midichlorians, force. Some people brush up against it being too defined, not too defined.
Mhm,
Willow's story was one of believing in himself and of relying on his strengths. Like I already noted, he defeats Bav Morda with sleight of hand and getting
mhm,
her hubris to destroy herself. But here he tells Silas she's not a Laura Dannon anymore. I warned Sorsha, like if you don't nurture that stuff,
mhm.
it can diminish. How did that all land with you in terms of nature, nurture, and maybe be needing to be reminded that you do just need to sometimes believe, and that those rules that Willow read about, because remember that first film ends with him getting a spell book, and
Mhm.
he probably read like, oh, but if I don't train her now, if I don't train her now, it's over. He
Mhm.
has sort of forgotten that he was already an adult with a wife and kids when he started,
Yeah,
you know?
it's almost like a counter argument to some of his beliefs. You got Sorcerer on one side, him on the other side here of just the way even hearing you describe it is kind of like, yeah, that potentially was the damage. And again, by the way, if she ends up, this is an entire life is just being a great baker of muffins. That's a great life too. It's if it's the life you want, it's the life you're good at, and that's all one thing. But to have him just kind of have this irrational fear and take away not just our agency, but just the ability to discover yourself in the right amount of time. This is the journey she's on, good or bad. This is what Laura Dannon is on. This is the path she's on, and I thought that was a good moment. Again because of parental kind of mentor conversation of like, it's not done. The journey's not done. It's never done. It's never done.
Yeah. And it's never too late. I mean, that's something that
Mhm.
we face in a lot of these myths. And am I too far gone? Can I redeem myself? Is there hope for the group, for the collective? Do you need to follow these rules of, well, magic is done this way? There's lots of, it's expressed in serious ways, like talking about
Yeah.
Alora Dannon's, being nurtured and being trained, and how she might be too old to begin the training.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but also in funny ways, like, can you make food with magic? And he's like, no, I tried that once and I was on the toilet for a week. Like, things like that. Willow's become very much about the system and the rules and trying to be High Aldwin, and he's got like
Yeah.
responsibilities now. But I think that's why I love that wake up call with his daughter, where she grabs the wand and the chest and is like, you're gonna give her this and you're
Mhm.
gonna go, because I loved that the daughter's like, I'm the one that found you,
Yeah.
in that first
Yeah.
film in the river. uh she sort of has to shake her dad out of paranoia and out of complacency, and say, like, it's like, she, again, we joke that Rhaenyra Targaryen and House of the Dragon has media literacy. Nims has media literacy. She's like,
Yeah.
Dad, your first movie was about belief and in the unexpected heroes. You were the tiny farmer that no one believed in. Now
Yeah.
she's the young, in love, kind of clueless
Yeah.
baker girl. You need to go remind her of what she can be,
Yeah.
which is really powerful, even if there is still the conversation to be had about, why did y'all lie to me?
Yeah, which is to come, but also a lot of it is we'll see how far they go into it because Willow does start to try to train, but some of the stuff you're talking about there reminds me a little bit of I jumped at Kanan and Rebels and the stuff with Sabine Wren, where it's like maybe the problem is you're just afraid of failing as a teacher. And maybe that's what's going on here. And there's some of that stuff with him too, of like, and I'm not saying Yoda was on a different train, but have Willow kind of be like, well, she probably can't do it. It's like, well, if you teach her, if you continue to believe, like you're saying, so it's the continued. Again, this series does deal with growing up. We got a generation coming up, but we have some characters that have grown up, and now you really have to remind yourself that the lessons are still ongoing. And I think that's part of what's at play in Willow, the character.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll move into final thoughts here. I'll rattle off
Mhm,
a couple things. We touched on it already. I just want to stress again, we talked about it a little bit in our House of the Dragon coverage. No spoilers for that if you didn't watch that
mhm,
show. But in terms of like queer representation, this is such a cool moment. I'm so glad to see the celebration that's happened amongst fans.
mhm,
I'm glad that John Kasdan and media about it has been really championing these two characters of Kit and Jade. And I think that Ruby
mhm.
Cruz and Aaron Kellerman have great chemistry. That's so great to see. I think the designs have been beautiful. I think that again, I'm not saying this to knock volume shows, but guess what? My favorite Disney Plus shows are volume shows, so far anyway. But it's really lovely. Like, it's just a lovely looking
Yeah.
world that they've established, and it feels true to that uh, aesthetic from the first one, but really fleshed out in some fun ways. I think it's whimsical. I think the music is great. That was something I
Mhm.
wanted to note. Of course, the first film was scored by James Howard, no, by James
Horner,
Horner,
yeah.
who unfortunately we lost tragically in 2015, and was a legend. They got James Newton Howard to come in and do the score here. So you've got one of his contemporaries and another amazing composer. I think it all worked really well. And the direction, by Stephen Woodfelden, Wolfenden, sorry.
Yeah.
Wolfenden. Can't read my own handwriting sometimes. He's done some Doctor Who, done some Outlander, done some Poldark, and was a second unit director on some Harry Potters. I think that he did a really good job. The real world element of the first director was supposed to be John Chu. He drops out. This guy comes in. Sometimes that's a very high pressure situation. And I think it all played really well. The show's confident, which I really like. So those are my last thoughts. If you want,
it's a great, great final thought. The show is very confident. I think this is, like I said, it is exactly what I thought a Willow series would be, and I mean that in all the great ways possible. I have always had a different relationship to this movie and world than others, and in that I've always loved it, and in a sense of it brings a feeling of joy, but it's not a world I've lived in a lot. And so this series, I have a different reaction to it and different involvement in the discussion of it, but this did exactly what it wanted to do. It's not just a simple nostalgic love letter. That idea gets tossed around far too much in this era of legacy sequels. It's a valid question, and you got to weigh each property on its own merits. This is, to me, not just a nostalgia play because they're having a lot of fun, but they're also raising important questions about the next generation and the generation come up and the generation that experienced it. And it's interesting seeing how that plays out. So I'm going to have a lot of fun tuning in every week. I'm really happy to see this happen, and the cast seems like they're having a lot of fun. I like the way it was shot. I did not come into this expecting House of the Dragon, and I don't think anyone should. And if you're watching this and you're thinking it's not for me, number one, that's always okay. Two, allow for who this story is for, to allow them to reach it and be met by the story, if you know what I mean. So I'm very happy to exist. Very happy to exist. That said, Alden, we're going to say we're going forward here. I might pop back in here, try to come back from the finale, but we're going to bring some people on here who are really excited for this series and have always loved the movie, and they're going to follow your lead in discussing some of the themes. And I think that's fun for me too, as an executive producer around these parts right now, just to pull back and really the people who are moved by this series are going to come talk about what they love.
Yes, Ken is going to be a Mad Mardigan. We're going to go send him to find a magical breastplate. And then maybe he'll pop in for a cameo. No, not a cameo. We're butchering that word as a culture. For a final appearance, an epic save. I completely agree with everything you said. Just echoing all of that. It's about intent, right? And sometimes in life we say the phrase impact over intent, especially in moments of hurt. But in art, intent is so important. If John Kasdan wanted to be true to the cheese and to the wonder and to the heart of that first film, I think he absolutely nailed all three of those things. Legacy sequels, you already touched on it. Is it precious? Is it not precious? We don't think that's a bad thing here. And I think that sometimes being precious affords you really warm moments, and the show invites you back in with an actual storybook visual, and so I think if you're checking this out and you just wanted to hear what we thought, maybe you haven't seen it, which I know some people do, and that's great, and definitely give it to the kids in your life and let them check this out. I think it's a great family watch, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited for all the faces that are going to be popping in. I don't want to list off people because schedules always change, but some friends some friends that haven't been on the channel before. It's going to be a really exciting 8 weeks. I keep wanting to say 6, but it's going to be 8, I believe, and then that's going to be a lot of fun. 7 weeks, 8 episodes. So yeah, we're really positive on this show. We have our little issues, our little things that we brush up against, but again, it's a brand new show. It's throwing you in, and I'm excited to see how these characters grow and change as this party is now assembled. And now we've got to go save Elora Danan because she got knocked out at the end of that first one.
She did.
Yep. So Ken, if you want to tell everybody where they can find you.
I do. Hey, I do. You can find me on Hive, not posting anything at Ken Napzok, but also just Ken Napzok across all social media platforms. Go to my website, kennapzok.com. I am selling books for the holidays. Why We Live Star Wars. Get your personalized copy through the shop on my website. You can check out Force Center, Pop Rock and Radio, all the other things I do. Alden, pitch it back to you to take us home.
Yes, and you can find me everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Hive at that Alden Diaz, ThatAldenDiaz, Octo Radio Star Wars podcast, where we do Star Wars talk, writing on StarTrek.com sometimes. And if there is a Twitter still when this episode comes out, that's where you can find me the most. But we will catch you next time in the kingdom of Tyr Asleen.